Did you get it? I have a nickname. I went to the States in 1961 as a foreign graduate student, and they don't know how to pronounce our name, Jagdish, Yagdish, etc. I joined Columbia University as a faculty member in 1963, and then they told me, we'll give you a nickname, Jag, like in Jaguar. And ever since that association, I've been dreaming of owning a Jaguar with a license plate, Jag's Jag. Why not, right? And the dream became a reality 15 years ago when I turned 60. I'm 75 now. Do I look 75? That's because I'm in marketing. First thing in marketing we learn and teach, it's all about packaging, right? As the ingredients age, the package has to be fresher. Right? But true story, when you turn 60, that's the Indian tradition. I have 2 grown-up children, they are married, all of them conspired. I come from the old generation where we don't count birthdays. So I went out in my local town, got my newspaper, turned around and saw this beautiful Jaguar, top of the line XJ model with a handwritten license plate, Jag's Jag, happy 60th birthday. Thank you. It was a rental car. So I'm still looking for my Jaguar. And now that Tata Motors owns Jaguar brand, I'm hoping to get one from Mr. Tata, right? Pretty much. I wanted to talk about something tied up very, very well at the end, and we have only about 5 minutes probably. There is a new triad power emerging. And the punchline is that the most strategic city rising in the new architecture is going to be Singapore. Just like Vienna came out of nowhere as the most strategic city in the Cold War era between the Soviet Union and the Allies, there's a complete new architecture, and therefore what role Singapore is likely to play in the future based upon the presentations that we have seen riding on the 2 wings of China and India. In fact, Singapore is very likely to reposition itself as a small bird flying in the sky on the 2 wings of China and India. That seems to be the future destiny of Singapore because of its strategic location, its transparency, etc. So I'll quickly go through some of the slides and come to the last slide very quickly because of the time. This is the fundamental shift from last century to this century. From emerging advanced economies, markets have been shifting to emerging economies. And what drove last century was ideology and politics. What is driving more and more economies are markets and resources. And for the last 2 days, you have heard that quite a lot. And now, why is this happening? The biggest factor is aging of the affluent nations. Japan has a negative population growth. Germany is a 0 population growth. US is growing at less than replacement rate, which is 2.1. It's about 1.5, 1.6. It's incredible. Their destiny lies wherever the growth markets are, which are the emerging markets, and we'll come to India and China in a moment. These economies also have created enormous economic reforms, whether it's the Chinese form of reform or the Indian form of reform, for example. So those markets are now, which were captive, restricted, are suddenly opening up for everybody, essentially. They're becoming competitive markets, essentially. But the third point is the most important role, called the rise of the middle class. And in India, I call it the call center couple. It's a major change. The call center couple is a young couple who meets each other in the college while living at home. They would like to get married, but as soon as they marry, they don't want to stay with their parents' home. Nor do they want any relationship with the neighbor grocery store who had a multi-generational relationship. There are new buyers for everything from cell phones to appliances to automobiles, everything. That is the new market. They don't know how to cook or clean. Therefore, there's a whole outsourcing industry. Outsourcing is not IT outsourcing, but home activities, cooking, cleaning, and childcare, basically outsourcing. Neither of them can survive individually. You need, in fact, in a large city, a dual income family, which changes the whole resource allocation from money to time. Time is more scarce for them, as was mentioned in the morning, than money, for example. That is fueling this market in a very, very big way. Transition has already taken place in China to a much larger extent. India is about to happen. More importantly, in India, the generation gap is now under 10 years. The older sister is unable to relate to the younger sister, not only in lifestyle and consumption, but in the fundamental values of what the family is all about. It is that massive a change taking place. It's a discontinuity, but it is creating markets and opportunities in a consumption society. So this is the key paradigm shift. 1800s was the European century. 1900s was the American century. This is the Asian century, but I think it's only about no more than like 25, 30 years. There has to be a sense of urgency how to integrate this economy to really become a dominant economy, as the numbers David showed, is very possible and is going to happen. But it will require both policy intervention, not just the free market processes. Because I am totally convinced that starting 2025 latest, we will hear about the same notion as the rise of China and India as about Africa. And in fact, the future of China and India may be made by Africa, which is a very important architecture from a consumption viewpoint, nothing else. So this is the new set of data that we have got. US still will be the largest economy, cannot afford to ignore that one. China will be the second, 13 trillion. This is a PPP-based GDP estimation. But the third one, India, is 6 trillion, which we think is an underestimation because India has a very large cash economy, which is not able to track properly. My estimate is that the Indian economy by that time will be actually about $8.5 to $9 trillion. Just to show you, the two markets alone, China and India, by 2020 in the PPP measure will be at least $10 trillion consumer markets alone, 6.5 trillion China, 3.5 trillion India. And again, I think we will underestimate the India market constantly because consumption is rising much greater than we have imagined, which is why you have the inflation anyhow. It's not driven by the urban consumer, that call center couple that I mentioned. Actually, the call center couple is struggling for money because there is no discretionary income. The rent is so high. But if you now go to the rural market, I don't mean the real villages, but a typical crane operator in Gujarat, in Kutch, today commands 65 to 70,000 rupees a month, which is about the same as an IT software person in Bangalore. But the discretionary income is much greater with that crane operator because he still lives with his parents in the same middle-class house, is married, and has an enormous savings or discretionary income to spend. Rather than save it as it should be the culture, spending has increased enormously. He's the real buyer in India today. In fact, sitting on the board of Wipro, not only the IT side alone, but the consumer care side, our growth mostly is coming from rural India, where they are buying branded products as much as possible as opposed to unbranded. So most of the unbranded markets are getting converted into branded markets, especially in India. I think this is the new reality by and large. So the new measures based upon this one, China will definitely be the dominant economy in the GDP by 2020, will surpass the US in any count, but China will slow down by itself. All affluent nations, as they age, begin to have slowed down. So after 2020, maybe 2025, hopefully India, by putting infrastructure that you heard quite a lot this morning, and also changing its policies quite a lot, probably will see a growth rise faster. So there's a cross point about 2025 where Indian economy may actually have more growth rate, but more importantly, The latest US intelligence report suggests that by 2030, if not 2040, India may become the largest economy. So you can't ignore that market despite all the issues and all the problems that we were talked about this morning, pretty much. So this is the book that I have written many years ago. It's revised now, called Chindia Rising. The point Chindia is very important because it talks about there are the following. This is the old triad power. US, Western Europe, and Japan. 45% of the world trade, commodities mostly, was controlled among them, 15 nations. 70% of the GDP, which means they did more value add by buying raw materials from commodities, and none of them has any growth left within the economy. They have to grow outside into these two markets by and large. This is the new triad power, therefore, arising. US still will be very critical, cannot ignore it. And the new triad power, you see, surprisingly, India, US on a positive relationship, China, US almost on a negative relationship. I put a question mark. But there's a third angle that's becoming very strategic to understand. While the rest of the world wants to have China and India as two rivals competing with each other, the real architecture is that China and India will learn how to cooperate with each other, not only in economic terms, but also political terms, and surprisingly military terms. This is a new architecture that we need to understand. It will have a massive impact on the consumption side. This will be the largest markets, and there are a bunch of other things. I don't have the time to go into the details, but innovation will come primarily because of scarcity of, surprisingly, resources. So we will invent, we will clone Mother Nature. Biological sciences and nanotechnology will dominate. So for example, it is very possible for me to clone anything. I can clone shrimp, I can clone chicken, I can clone sheep. That's a totally different science emerging for the 21st century relative to others, just to release the supply function, if nothing else. And very importantly, if you don't believe that thing, I remember I grew up at a time when we had only had natural pearls. Today I can grow cultural pearls in any shape, color, form possible and grow the capacity. So capacity expansion will become very key. Race for resources will become very key as we try to capture the markets at the same time. And the third key element, and because of the time I will not go into the details, but one of the key aspects is this one, is that we'll see more cartelization at the raw material level, whether those are agricultural raw materials or industrial raw materials, pretty much. I see that huge set of mergers, acquisitions at the upstreaming. I was taught, and I taught for 49 years now roughly, that the more you do the value add and branding, greater the margins. That theory is gone now completely. In the PC business, the value add margin by a company like Lenovo or Dell is only 11%. 89% is all procurement, out of which 79% goes to only two incumbents, which is Intel and Microsoft. They're laughing all the way to the bank where you are struggling with the margins. So margins are rising surprisingly in the upward chain rather than the downward process, which is what we think marketing is all about, which is fascinating change by and large. And the last one is about politics. The politics will steer toward this one. And you just heard Obama administration steering the American economy toward Asia. China is very key, but Japan and Korea have been already aligning like that. So the largest trading partner of South Korea now is China. India will become the second largest, it looks like. So is Japan at the same time. So we have to look at the new architecture, and in the process, I will conclude about Singapore. Singapore is destined to become, surprisingly, it's in its destiny, a major global hubway to Asia with the rise of China and India. It will become a global hub for 6 flows. This is the project I've done for the government of Singapore. How do we capture these flows? The first is the flow of products. So we have basically Singapore Seaport has become the largest port in the world. And my memories in the early 80s versus now is that it's nothing but full of ships waiting to be docked and unloaded and loaded, for example. Flow of people, the north-south traffic in Asia. So Changi Airport has been expanded to capture that flow. Flow of capital, Singapore is still not capable of starting its own, let's call it a stock exchange. unless many multinationals, global headquarters, not regional, put it around here, which, as you know, many Indian companies are already doing it, but it's a great, great location for becoming a major capital city in the same league as Shanghai will become. Hong Kong is already there, New York is there, and London has a huge potential. But the other capital market is more important in Singapore, which is private equity. So in the last floors, we basically found the Swiss private banking model is more appropriate here, and therefore today I think it's going to grow. So companies like Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway, KKR, Blackstone probably are likely to come here as a gateway, which is a major opportunity. The next one is R&D. Very big investment is possible here where the world invests into the city. Education and health are the things. So like a small bird, it will soar into the sky on the two wings of China and India with unlimited potential. So per capita income of Singapore probably will surpass Hong Kong in the process, which are the two contending cities in the world, which is the way I see the world. So I'm very excited about this city. I think this city has a lot of potential, and both the policy and the market process all come together. Thank you very much.